Welcome to The Mental Game, live from the Media Hub here on riotradio.ca. I'm Heather.
And I'm Bree.
Today, we feel the rhythm, we feel the vibe, a rhyme, I should say. It's team dynamic time. I missed it.
Yes.
I messed it up.
It's okay.
Yes.
We all make mistakes.
1993's Cool Runnings. I don't know about you, Bree, but one of my favorite movies that has to do with sports and team dynamics. And while most of the movie was made up, we have a screenshot here of the actual real Olympic Jamaican bobsled team that the movie was inspired by. It was interesting. Some of the real Jamaican athletes mentioned that actually doing it was no comedy. And there was nights they went hungry. There was times that you were kind of living and kind of fighting for room with each other. There was fights, there was anger, there was doubt, not to mention the small matter of going downhill at 80 miles or 130 kilometers per hour about 3 times in an afternoon. So it was much harder with a lot less laughter. But the real characters and the characters in the movie both kind of highlighted how it wasn't just about winning. Obviously, that was the goal, part of the goal, but it was about the development of the team and the development of themselves individually as characters. These athletes had to transform from individuals with separate goals into a single unit, realizing that winning wasn't as important as that bond and as that development. And each member had to learn to trust each other, especially with these high speeds and dangerous runs where one person's failure, like my mess up with that really great intro, really had an influence on people's safety and reinforced that a team, the whole, is only as strong as its weakest. The Winter Olympics start tomorrow. Maybe we'll see some bobsledding. Bree, do you have a favorite that you like to watch in the Winter Olympics?
I love the big air event. I did recently hear that Mark McMorris took a fall and he will not be competing in it. Very sad for Canada.
Yes.
But big air and then Winter Olympics, period.
Yeah.
Winter Olympics is like my holy grail.
Yes. And what we notice in sport, right? It's, today we're talking a lot about team dynamics and team sports. So we might often think about like the hockey teams, for instance, that we're about to see. But individual elite athletes, especially when you see them on the podium, you hear them talking about this idea of a team, right? Even though in their sport it might be more individual, they have people on the sidelines. I was even reading an article about an elite wrestler, and he was saying, even though he's alone on the mat, he'll often look to the bench, look to his fellow teammates that do their own individual wrestling for that courage and that inspiration. Students that reach high academic levels, you might also recognize the team of support that it took to help you reach there. Really interesting. Albert Einstein, we often think of like this genius on his own. He was not a lone genius. He rarely worked entirely alone. We don't know many of the other names, though, that supported Einstein, but he relied on a network of friends and colleagues and collaborators to develop his theories. So teamwork makes the dream work. Research highlights the benefits, right? Teamwork and collaboration enables better problem solving, unlocks our potential for innovation. It increases our individual happiness and our own personal growth. It boosts performance and allows for smarter risk taking and sparks creativity. But as we all know, teamwork and collaboration can be really challenging. So why do teammates get under our skin? Be a gym buddy or on a group project. Bree, have you ever been more stressed by a teammate than the actual game?
Oh boy, I can't count the amount of times.
Yes. Yeah, right. And so what's really interesting is we often think, especially in sports or academics, like it's about that end goal of winning or increasing your GPA. But the collaboration, the dynamics is often where we notice a lot of fumbles. So if it gets under our skin, it usually matters. There's this emotional element at work here. Part of this is due to something called our social identity theory by Tessel and Turner. And what they identified through research is how individuals define themselves is based on their group membership. So our individuals' knowledge of being part of a specific group, that's called social categorization, our social status, so our kind of social comparison, but also the emotional significance, the social identification of these groups. They provide us a sense of belonging, which our brain translates to safety, and it also builds our sense of self-esteem. When we join a team or join a group, it becomes part of who we are. We're wearing some DC Lord gear today. We become part of a community and part of something larger than ourselves. And so a threat to this group, a threat to the whole group in its entirety, is translated in our brain as a threat to ourselves. But on an individual level, when that tension starts to brew amongst our team, we also start to translate this to a survival response. Last week, our episode 1, Pressing Start, and how we get our mind in the game, we explored something called the NUTS theory for our stress activation. Teamwork gets really nutty. If we think about working with new people, working with our colleagues, or working on a group project, there's some new novelness there, right? New personalities, new dynamics that we're trying to balance. There's a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability. What's that person's effort going to be? What's the vibes? How do they communicate? And it's very threatening. It can be threatening to our role, our resources, our grade, and really it alters that sense of control. And so with sharing, we know that there's going to be some compromise, and it's hard getting along in the sandbox. So this irritation is often just our nervous system sending a survival risk alert. Will I be kicked out of this group? Will I survive? And so it stirs up all sorts of stuff. Humans, we're social creatures. We thrive with collaboration. But as we're discussing, it's hard and it gets quite nutty. Teamwork is a skill, though. So this was really interesting. When I looked through some research, there's some interesting studies on how we can actually grow our collaboration, and it needs to be seen as a habit that we can build. There's a really great book, and we have a screenshot on it in case you want to grab it from your local library here on campus. It's a 2009 book called Collaborative Habit: Life Lessons for Working Together. It's a fantastic book that emphasizes that successful collaboration is a skill that can be developed and refined over time like a habit. And it's actually written by a really world-famous choreographer. So in kind of the sport world through dance. Now, the author recognizes that it's tricky to form this habit. Most of us grew up in an environment where our individual achievements were celebrated. Mm-hmm. The author quotes, "We are each of us generals in an ego-driven army of one, each the center of an obscured cosmos, taking such as much happiness as we can find. Collaboration? Why? Why bother? We only live once. Grab whatever you can." So she tries to highlight how we can't force people to collaborate. I don't know about you, Bree, but if you're kind of forced to be working with people, it automatically gets our defense system up and those nuts really firing. And it's challenging, I think, for many of us due to that emotional vulnerability that teamwork can bring. Twyla also quotes the author of the book that every collaboration is a love story. Yes. And it really speaks to that emotional element that I think many of us feel when we are collaborating. So after this break, we're going to hear from a couple students how they navigate their own teammate love stories back here on riotradio.ca. Welcome back to the Mental Game here on riotradio.ca. Bree, you spoke to some students this week about their experience collaborating.
I did, and it was very interesting to hear what they were saying. I talked to some students in the gym, some students from sports teams, our local Durham Lords, and it was very interesting to see how conflict happens daily.
Yeah.
Right? We constantly have conflict, whether it's in the lineup at Tim Hortons, which if you've been on campus, you know what I'm talking about, and whether it's on, a group project that we have, unfortunately been maybe linked up with some people that we don't know. Maybe we've worked with them before and we don't necessarily like their working style. But talking with these students, it kind of helped us normalize that conflict is something that happens. And while we know that conflict is scary and it's intimidating and we usually want to avoid it, conflict does help make us stronger.
Yeah.
Right? It's the little things that kind of build up our tolerance and help us create the conflict resolution skills, which are, again, important in our daily lives. So our first clip that we're going to show here is about small things that either classmates, group mates, or our teammates do that drive us bonkers. And we don't know why, but they always drive us bonkers. So in this video coming up, we have our DC women's volleyball team and some members of our Lords basketball team. Here we go.
I am definitely a perfectionist, and I am my biggest self-critique. So when I sometimes hear from other teammates like, oh, it's okay, like you're okay, like hearing that sometimes stresses me out more than it needs to sometimes. But I know it's coming from a good place, but it's just like having that conversation and recognizing it and discussing it together really helps.
We're locking up for, let's just say, 20 seconds, and then for the last couple seconds, they get a backdoor bucket. It's the worst.
There's one time during practice where one of my teammates came in, no energy at all, didn't say hi, and it really frustrated me because everyone else was having a good practice, but he wasn't putting all in his on the court, so that kind of frustrated me. But I also understood maybe he's just having a bad day. But yeah, that is one instance where a teammate has frustrated me, but it should have not bothered me. But yeah.
So as we can see, minor things that are happening on and off the court, in the classroom, they bug us and they get under our skin.
Yeah.
And as Joseph was saying there, we might not understand why it's bugging us. It's so small. Why would this be something that annoys us? But maybe we had something going on earlier in our day. Maybe this person had something going on in our day, right? We also had a mention there from Chelsea who talked about how maybe when she's not having a great practice and her teammates are saying, do your best, you're doing great, how that might irk us a little bit, right?
Yeah.
They are likely trying to be supportive, and in that moment, we just don't want to hear it. We have to also understand that our teammates are trying to be helpful and do a little bit better to maybe receive that feedback from them. And if you're not open to the feedback, then we just politely say, you know what, I'm having a day. Let's talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I loved in that video, even just that mention of like someone's energy being off, how we can sometimes personalize that. It's almost that uncertainty of like, why are they acting this way? I loved how he said, like, he didn't say hi to me.
Yeah, what?
Right? That happened to me with a colleague, and I'm not a small talker. I don't mind if people don't want to engage in small talk.
Yep.
But the fact that our offices were right beside each other and they never said good morning to me, and I was like, did I do something wrong? Why aren't they saying hi? And it was like, as long as we acknowledge, like, hey, I don't actually want you to say good morning and talk to me for a really long time, but as long as you're not saying hi because you're mad at me, it's good.
Then we're good.
Right? It was just that uncertainty of like, ooh, I'm noticing something, what's going on here.
Yep.
And
What's happening with the vibes?
What's happening with the vibes? And vibes are so contagious.
Yes, they are. And we're actually about to see a video on that very shortly. So this one's about how do you handle situations when someone's energy level or vibes aren't matching yours.
Yeah. Let's give it a watch.
On the side, I say pick up your intensity, I'll uplift him, make him get on the same level, and then we'll go hard.
I think it's really important to remember that your day might not be like anybody else's and they could be going through a rough time, and just constantly encouraging them and cheering them on can help them come up as well and maybe get out of the rut that they're in.
When someone's effort doesn't necessarily match mine, whether that be within the classroom or as a team, it has a negative effect on my mental health, as well as it has a negative effect on my ability to best perform to the task that needs to be completed. An example of this could necessarily be when I'm at rugby training. It sometimes the guys have an off day, which sometimes you can't control, but at the end of the day, it's not at the same level as me in that given situation, given it can be the other way around. But it does frustrate me, it does negatively affect me, and I think it overall negatively affects the team atmosphere. It could also be done in a school project where you have someone who just isn't pulling their weight, and it just simply doesn't equate to the best result that you want to see from that partner or from the project in total. It just, that sort of, everyone has to be on the same page, everyone has to be giving the same amount of effort no matter what the situation is, in my opinion.
So it's funny here to see the vibe check, right?
Yeah.
We can see that when we have these school projects or when we're on our rugby team. If the vibes aren't feeling good with the team, the rest of the team is probably going to be able to feel that energy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I would say here is, one, making sure that we're encouraging our teammates, we're checking in on them. If they're having a bad day, that's okay. Everyone has a bad day, right?
Yeah.
Just giving them support, uplifting them, like Brooke said in our first clip there, and then making sure that you're letting them know that you're there for them, communicating with them, pulling aside, maybe having a discussion with them like, hey, I'm here if you want to have a chat after practice about what's going on, and if you don't, that's great. I'll see you next practice.
Kind of planting those seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of kind of a metaphor or saying of, we want to be more of a thermostat than a temperature gauge, or a thermometer is the word I'm looking for. We want to be more like a thermostat, in that we kind of help set the temperature in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And very similar, if you're, in your winter coat with your toque on and gloves on, and I come in really hot and heavy, there's going to be a mismatch there. And so I think it's about, we were going to talk a little bit later about the power of emotional intelligence, being able to kind of be able to pick up on those vibes, know that a teammate is having an off day, and not be coming in, I forget the athlete's first name there, but kind of almost being too optimistic and too positive, coming in too hot when, they still got their toque and their coat on. It's like, ooh, how can we, like a thermostat, help people either warm up or cool down without kind of going to the extremities? But vibes are contagious.
Yeah. Read the room, as they say.
Read the room.
Yes.
Yes.
Our next video here talks a bit more about the tension that we can feel. So we just talked about energy levels, and this is how to deal with the tension that's happening in those group projects on your teams. So next up here, we got more from the basketball team and our volleyball ladies.
There's always tension on the team with my teammates, but it's competitive tension, if anything. Like friendly competition. We're always fighting for our spot on the team, whether it's the starting lineup or not. But in the end, it's always friendly competition. We're all trying to make each other better.
Usually just straight up, I just go talk to the person either after or before a practice and be like, hey, it looks like you're frustrated at me. Just communicating throughout that instance and trying to get it done sooner than later. So always trying to resolve it quicker and just being direct with that person.
I've had tension with teammates and people in group projects not always meeting deadlines and kind of coming in late and not always having the same focus as others. So when this is a problem, I like to have a one-on-one talk and make sure everyone's on the same page, because if you say how important it is to you, they'll get the point and it helps them.
Sometimes when we have problems on the court and we're all down, we're all mad, sometimes we'll just stop and we'll say we need a timeout to talk to the group and refocus and regain our composure.
A good old-fashioned timeout.
Yes, and I was just about to say, Heather, timeouts, how well do they work?
Yeah, I'm a big lover of timeouts. Yeah.
Yep. Take a break.
Take a pause. Yeah.
Get it collected back together in group projects and teams. This happens a lot.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I heard a lot of clear, transparent communication, right? Like you said earlier, not avoiding that conflict or that tension, leaning into that a little bit, bringing the awareness to it in a compassionate way of hey, I'm seeing you. I'm seeing some of this energy here, and being able to hold that conversation. There's an interesting kind of S shape that we have with team development. We kind of get started with teams. We're like, I'm part of the basketball team. There's this new group project. But then there's this dip. And there's this conflict and this tension as we're like, who's doing what? They mentioned fighting for our spot. What are the roles here? How are we communicating? And then the hopes is that through some different skills that we've been talking about today, we start then to kind of climb and peak that performance. But there's always gonna be some tension in teams. Yeah.
Always. And even when we're breaking down the steps for this group project, let's say we have a huge group project, it's 50% of our grade. Obviously, that is going to hold a lot of feelings for you, right? If our group project is not being done in advance or someone's falling behind, that is conflict we definitely have to deal with. So like you said, being compassionate, making sure that we're not assuming that they're just pushing it off to the side, and maybe having a meeting to say, these are the deadlines that I would like to have each of these completed by, right? Setting some actual goals, having an open, clear discussion with the teammates or the classmates, and maybe giving them a bit of grace.
Love that.
I think that's a good one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we go to break here, our video that we're going to show next will be our break. We hear some great tips and suggestions from Coach Tony of the volleyball team. We have Dana, an athletic therapist with Durham College. And then we also have Emmanuel, who is the strength and conditioning coach for both Durham College and Ontario Tech. Some great information. Here we go.
Do the start of the year is we have the girls pick these team norms. So team norms is to hold each other accountable type thing. So within college and that, we don't want to have like these elementary kind of rules. What we want to do is have them have a voice to create their own expectations and kind of things that they want to hold each other accountable to, because when they leave us, next thing they do, they go to the working field and they got to learn how to self-advocate and stuff like that. So we want to build those life skills for them when they get to the next level or after volleyball is done, to be able to advocate and be able to approach people at a professional manner or just like a personal level as well.
Between listening to athletes that I've been treating in the clinic or dealing with our student trainers who are helping out our teams, I think biggest point that I've seen that teamwork really falls apart is when things aren't going to plan. Whether that's teams not performing as well as they should, or if an injury isn't presenting in a textbook way, oftentimes that's where things start to fall apart. So biggest advice would be make sure you're focusing on how you're responding to that adversity first. And then from there, we're looking at how do we communicate productively with coaches, teammates, your athletic therapy team, to ensure that we're focusing on moving forward and what we can do in the future to change things versus...
In terms of what makes a good team, I think number one, you have to have a group of people that are like-minded. And I think in terms of personalities, you can have different types of personalities, but if there's no clarity on the vision, if they're not good people in general, I find, then things start to break down. I think whenever I recruit or I interview, I really do almost like a vibe check to see if they're willing. They don't necessarily have to be the most skilled. I think that's much easier to develop, but having that kind of foundation of a good person and things that qualifies for that would be like their initiative. You could talk about their different situations or experiences with initiative, or their willingness to step up for the team. And sometimes you'll see these students or these athletes where they just kind of have to step up. They have that willingness, and it's not always easy, but they're willing to find the answer. They might not be good. They're not afraid to make mistakes. I think that if you surround yourself with a lot of those people on a team, typically that generally resolves a lot of issues. And obviously that ties in with the communication and things like that. But I also think maybe more important is that as a leader, you have to lead by example, and you have to be there with them and be good with delegation and be very, very strategic on how you manage these people. I think you start to lose them when they feel like you don't care as much as them. And so I want to make sure that I'm always putting in the effort, matching them, if not doing more, and also making sure that every single person on the team feels valued to some degree. So I think with that's what makes a good team dynamic. Again, clarity with expectations, setting boundaries, and then upholding that accountability, right? And then
what great real life experiences and tips for moving forward as we maybe, continue in college and university. But once we're getting out into the real world, something that I really liked that Manny talked about there was value. So making sure that the individuals are still feeling valued when you're having these discussions, especially if we're in a group project and maybe you feel like your idea is a little bit better than the other person's. We're still valuing that person's idea and letting them know that, I think it is a good idea. Maybe we can tweak it a tiny bit to make it work still, but while also engaging from the other sides of the group and making sure that everyone agrees before we go forward. So definitely making sure people feel valued. We talked a lot about clear communication, open communication. Well, all of that is important. It's also just important to make sure we get down to those little things that make us feel like human and make us feel important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So great tips from Coach Tony, Dana, and Manny. Thank you so much. To continue talking about some conflict resolution, Heather has some really good information for us.
Yeah. So, we've been talking a lot today about how working in a team really encourages that personal growth, increases our life satisfaction, and reduces our stress. But people, we are human beings, and so there's complexities to some of these team dynamics. We're more likely when we're with a team to take more calculated risks that can lead to innovation. So it can really support in our careers, in our athleticism, in our studies, being able to use a collaborative approach. So part of what was being discussed there is recognizing that each individual has unique gifts and talents and skills. But I love that mention of it's a bit of a vibe check, right? Like how do all of these people kind of fit together? So when we bring people to the table, whether it's a soccer team or a group project, one really important thing is to slow down and really kind of look at what all of those unique gifts and skill sets is. But then they also talked about forming that common purpose. How do we take all of these individuals and form this one cohesive common goal? And the other thing that we want to be thinking about here when it comes to conflict resolution is what we call enabling conditions. And so there's been some research done by Haas and Morstein from the Harvard Business Review magazine in 2016. They highlighted some of the research that has been spent here in team dynamics and what really enables teams to grow. And we heard many of these be mentioned in that last videos. Having a compelling direction, a direction that energizes and orientates and engages us. What does this mean? We can't be inspired and energized if we don't know what we're working towards. So explicit, clear goals. And this comes also with having strong structure. So whether this is clarity on what our roles are, that vision and that mission, what resources we have, what are the processes, there needs to be some structure in our team dynamic. And so I love, Bree, how you mentioned if we're sitting with a group project, really understanding who's doing what. Yes. What are some of those deadlines? Setting some of that structure can be really helpful for a team. This leans into something that is called supportive context. So what's the reward system? Why am I putting all this effort? It's not just the kind of the grade that I'm getting, but really thinking about what's the reward behind all of this effort and trying to get this team to mush together? And what are our information systems? How are we communicating? Where is that communication being stored? How do I message someone? The last piece of the enabling conditions is all around a shared mindset. So having the sense of a common identity, it's why we have kind of, what are these things called? Not landlords, mascots,
yes.
Right? Having a mascot, having kind of the shared identity. We talked early on that kind of idea of a social identity, right? And so it needs to have something that brings us together and develops a common understanding. What's really interesting as well is there's 3 coordinating mechanisms in effective teamwork that we can really reflect on how to enhance our conflict resolution by remembering these are 3 essential components. So shared mental models, as we've been talking, that common understanding, clarity on roles, clarity on tasks, and what that workflow looks like. We need what is called closed loop communication, and maybe play a bingo game today on how much we talk about communication, how many times we say that word communication. There's a reason why we're mentioning it so much today, is we need it to help develop healthy team dynamics. So active information sharing and acknowledgement of that communication. Brie, I don't know about you, but I have found often with some of the team conflict, it's often centered around communication, of not feeling like you have the same information as somebody else. Gossiping is kind of happening, and there's kind of this mismatch of what information is out there.
Agreed.
Have you found communication kind of being a big root of team dynamic challenges?
Yeah, and it's typically not from the root source, right?
Absolutely.
Typically, we find that in these team dynamics, we're cozy with one half of the team, maybe compared to another half of the team, and gossip does happen. So maybe people are just getting misinformation.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Or some people have a little bit more information and communication from a coach or from a leader, and then that makes the rest of us kind of feel a little bit uncertain.
Why don't I have this piece of information?
Absolutely. The last element here is mutual trust. And so we need to have confidence in our team members to the dedication that they're holding to our collective goals, and also that they're holding the team's best interest. So how do we kind of put this forward in our own sort of teams that we have, whether it's in the classroom or on the field? The first lesson here that research shows us is the setup is really important. What's interesting is the initial conditions on how we set up teams matter the most.
Yes.
Right? And so how we set things up. And the research is showing us that our beginnings matter. We have something called a sensitivity to initial conditions. Ooh. And I don't know about you, Bree, but when we talk about first impressions, right, we can sometimes remember how something is pitched to us really changes our overall experience.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so what this means for you is really think about that setup. Really think about how you're showing up in those first initial connections, the first time you sit down as a group and start to divvy up all the work. That really matters how we set things up. So get to know each other, get to know each other's strengths and personal interests and weaknesses, communication style. As a teacher at OTU, one of the things I really encourage my groups to do is even discuss like what time might be really bad times for you to work on things or communicate.
Yep.
Maybe you have a part-time job and you don't have to share all the details of your life, but being able to say, you know, weekends, I'm not going to respond to messages. Weekends are really busy for me. It just gives insight onto maybe what that workflow will look like with your team.
And it sets a nice expectation. Right?
Absolutely.
Your phone's not going off like crazy, and you might have other projects to work on, and you don't have the capacity for it.
Absolutely. The second lesson here that we see in research that can help us with some conflict resolution is team functioning is all about how teams treat each other. So we want to be an active participant in something called psychological safety. It's a big fancy term that basically means it's a shared belief held by everyone in the group, everyone in the team, that everyone is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, sharing ideas, and we're not going to be embarrassed, rejected, or punished by speaking up and sharing some of our insights, our personality, our perspective. So we can build psychological safety. It's tough. It requires that team approach, but we can build it through cooperative tasks and leaning into what are those rewards, clear goals, and really working on building trust overall with the team.
Just before you move on to lesson 3 here, Heather, have you ever experienced a time where you've made a suggestion on something and it was knocked down right away and you've never spoken up in that meeting again?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Right? Because right away, what we're kind of, our brain is saying to us is, it's not safe for me to, you know, put my hand up.
Yep.
I have a 5-year-old and he made a mistake on calling a cat or a snake a vertebrate. I don't know what a vertebrate is. I'd have to look it up right now. Right? And he was saying, you know, all his classmates were laughing at him and he now doesn't want to answer anymore. So how our group respond, be classmates or our teammates, it really sets the tone of like, hey, am I safe to kind of put my hand up and try something here?
And it comes back to giving people grace too, right? We make
Absolutely.
mistakes.
Absolutely. So lesson 3 is all about leaning into effective team functioning by embracing conflict. So as mentioned earlier, under the right conditions, conflict can actually provide us some insight, some energy, some momentum. So don't shy away from disagreements. If you're noticing some tension, if you're noticing someone shares an idea that's different than yours, we don't want to laugh at them, but we want to be able to continue to share those perspectives and see where some of that tension is coming from. The 4th lesson is that teams are emotional, really embracing and acknowledging that collaboration is going to stir up the feelings. And so this is why we need to build emotional intelligence. We talked earlier about being able to read the room, right? We can grow our emotional intelligence through mindfulness, being able to really practice with our mindset and where we are shifting our focus and putting our thoughts. We can play with perspective taking. One of my favorite tools to play with perspective taking is through something called a walking meditation. So walk outside, be in nature, and then shifting your focus from what do I see that's really far in the distance and what do I see that's right in front of me? What can I smell that's maybe really far away, and what do I smell right in my hand? So we're playing with our senses and trying our best to kind of shift that perspective and see what maybe we're missing when we're too far out or too far in. We can also build our emotional intelligence through active empathetic listening. So really participate in discussions, lean into being that active listener. And sometimes it's not about sharing your perspective or sharing your thoughts, really practicing that skill of listening to understand somebody else's point of view. And last bit for building our emotional intelligence is all through emotional regulation. So this is where our deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, yoga, we talked about timeouts, taking a pause. This is a skill that we want to be building. Lesson 5, and it's our last lesson for conflict resolution. It's all about adapting with integrity. So we know pivots are going to come. We know that we're going to have to ebb and flow and change, and that was mentioned in some of the videos. Charles Darwin has a famous quote that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. So we wanted to keep the integrity of our workflows and our goals at heart, but embracing that change is going to happen. We might get put into a new position. Deadlines might not be being met, but how can we continue to pivot as a team from a place of integrity?
Yes.
Yeah. So conflict resolution, I think one of the big pieces here is playing with something we call impact versus intent. Brie, I don't know about you, but sometimes when we made a mistake, there's some conflict with somebody, we are so guarded on what our intention was. I didn't mean to offend you. I didn't mean to show up to practice late. I didn't mean to roll my eyes. It wasn't about you. We get so defensive in what our intention was. Do you ever catch yourself doing this?
Oh, yeah. And I didn't mean to say it like that. I'm sorry, I'm an emotional human.
Absolutely. And so what we can try doing is actually shifting the energy and the focus to the impact, right? Instead of feeling like we have to defend ourselves and show what our intention was and maybe contributing to that breakdown in the team, stop defending our intent and start mending the impact. And so we want to take a little bit of accountability here, not responsibility, right? But taking a little bit of accountability and being able to acknowledge the impact that maybe the eye roll or a showing up late or missing a deadline can hold, or coming in with a bit of a mood, right? We're not saying that we're not allowed to feel this way, but going, ooh, I'm taking accountability for the vibe that I kind of contributed and brought to this team practice.
For sure.
Most conflict is a mismatch in understanding from a place of communication, not malice, right? Most of our conflict is around our systems not working around communication, having clarity on our roles. So we can practice with different scripts, playing with this idea of intent versus impact by saying like, I know you didn't mean to do this, but here's how it landed. Or one of my favorites is, here's the story I'm telling myself, right? Here's the story I'm telling myself about you showing up to practice late. I'm telling myself that you don't respect me and that you don't want to be a part of this team. And what that does is it helps the individual recognize that we want to focus a little bit on the impact here, how things impacted us. And by setting it up as like, here's the story I'm telling around it, it's less about you made a mistake or self-deprecating, like I'm such a failure, I did this wrong. And it's like, let's just acknowledge how some of these things are playing a role here in the overall conflict.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's, we're all in the same group chat, but we're kind of reading the tone a little bit differently. Group work often fails because there's expectations that are not clearly spoken. I don't know about you, Brie, but this is a big one for me for conflict in teams and in groups is I've unconsciously set an expectation. This is going to be due by this time. Videos are going to be sent by 9 a.m. if you do a podcast with somebody, right? And then when we're not communicating that and we start getting frustrated, it's like, well, we didn't even put that on the table. Those expectations weren't even communicated. So sometimes it's looking at what has been unspoken. oftentimes too, sometimes there's a communication mismatch in how we like to communicate. Some of us are more direct. Some of us don't add a lot of emotional flowers around our communication, and others can read this as really blunt. So sometimes it's just really learning through conflict resolution, hey, how can we communicate so we're hearing the same thing, right? So how can we're maybe playing different instruments, but there's a symphony in what we're kind of building and sharing together.
Nice.
I like that metaphor.
Good way to put
there.
that, yeah.
Thanks. So a lot of conflict resolution is really looking at how we communicate and how we play with perspective. We also, with conflict resolution, the last thing we want to say here is we want to control the controllables. We can't control a lot here. We can't control somebody's effort. We can't control somebody's mood and how they show up. We can't control their personality. We can't control if they're missing deadlines. So what can we control here? We can control how we set boundaries, how we communicate, how we explain our expectations, how early we address things. I loved in some of those videos, many of them talked about this. And so we really want to try to focus on what we have the influence over, control over. We have control over how we show up. And so if we're, again, coming back to that metaphor of being a thermostat, we want to try our best to show up as the athlete, show up as the group member that we're hoping other people are also coming in with.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Put your best foot forward, and there's that saying, pressure makes diamonds, right?
Ooh, absolutely.
Yep. Don't be scared of pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine, being a wellness coach yourself, you probably talk a lot about conflict resolution. What is wellness coaching?
Yeah, it's a lot of conflict resolution. It's a lot of team dynamic and group dynamic talk. So wellness coaching, it's not psychotherapy. It is not a medical or academic approach. It's very similar to an athletic coach. I'm not in the game of your life. I'm on the sidelines. And with that, I can provide some unique perspectives and some tools to help you play with perspective. We do a lot in wellness coaching around exploring our accountability, exploring our communication styles, how do we set boundaries. We play with a lot of regulation tools like building our emotional intelligence, and all DC students have access to wellness coaching and other types of mental health supports through the Campus Health and Wellness Center. So if wellness coaching is something you maybe want to tackle to talk through some of that team dynamics, building your accountability, building your communication skills, all students start with what we call a mental health needs assessment, just to make sure this is the best fit for you, or maybe one of our other resources would be a better fit. So you can book an appointment at the Campus Health and Wellness Center. You can jump online, durhamcollege.ca/CHWC, and book an appointment right online, or come in. We're in G1030, right near the Flex. So one of the things that we do in wellness coaching is we actually try some of these different skills out. And so one of the ways that we can play a mental drill here with conflict resolution and team dynamics is what I call the irritation check. What to do when a group member is really bugging you. And so when tension is showing up, whether it's a group project or on the field of a team, we want to try a bit of a reset drill here. So first thing, we want to regulate ourselves. So this is where the idea of a timeout comes in, pausing before we engage in these discussions. So taking some deep breaths, going for a walk. We can't fix team dynamics with a dysregulated nervous system. So we have to regulate ourselves before we go into these conversations. The next thing you might want to try is examining what's actually broken within the team dynamics. Is it clarity? Is it communication? Is it trust? Some of those core things we were talking today, where's the disalignment? And this can help us reframe the conflict as a system issue, not a personality issue. I think when we go into conflict resolution and some of these intense conversations, we're so focused almost on like, I don't like that person, or that person doesn't like me. And it's often not a personality mismatch, and it's often not about this person as a whole. It's a conflict of a system issue, whether that's building of the trust of a team, our communication styles, or clarity around some of those roles and some of those expectations. Third, we want to state what we need, not what they did wrong. So, hey, I need a little bit of clarity on roles here so we're not double working. I need a quick check-in so we're aligned before practice. I loved that one of the individuals in the video said that, right? Before practice saying, hey, I want to do a bit of a vibe check. So we're not going in hot and heavy and saying, you did this wrong, and this is really irritating me. I need to know what on time means for us because I'm noticing that we're showing up at different times here. So it's really just gaining some clarity versus pointing the finger and pointing that blame. And finally, kind of deciding where to put our energy. Is this something that needs repair, reset, or release? And what I mean by that is repair. Do we need to have a short conversation? Do we need to mend some of the broken expectations, some of the communication styles here? Does something need some repair? Our reset, do we need to actually revisit and restate some of the roles and expectations, the deadlines? Do we need to kind of reset some of the tools that we're using here? Or release? Do we need to find a way to mentally make some shifts inside of ourselves and take some different perspectives here? I loved in some of the videos we watched today, recognizing that people are allowed having off days. When they're coming in with that vibe that's just really not aligning, it might not be us. And so giving people grace and recognizing that we might need to work on something more mentally ourselves. So conflict doesn't mean your team is failing. Teams are emotional systems, and great teams don't avoid tension. They regulate it, they name it, they address it. So we know the benefits and the challenge of having a team, be group project or the volleyball court. I know for many of us, myself included, if we're trying to get into some more exercise, which is a great emotional regulation tool, heading to the Flex Center, we might also want to take a team approach.
Yes.
And have a bit of a gym buddy. Bree, very quickly, how can we find a gym buddy but not have to use the conflict resolution tools we've been talking about today?
Yes. So as Heather mentioned, going to the gym can be intimidating. So grabbing a buddy, someone that has similar interests as you, will help avoid some of those conflicts. Of course, not all conflicts can be avoided. Maybe you found the perfect gym buddy and you've decided on 8 a.m. is our day that we're going to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They don't show up at 8 a.m. on Wednesday. How are we going to deal with this conflict?
Yeah.
First of all, we're having a conversation with them. Maybe they were up until 2 a.m. working on a project. That's where we have to make sure, like you said, we're being accountable for our own actions and maybe how we came off towards them in them being late for our workout. And maybe they just needed to get some more sleep. Right? Yeah. We need to make sure that when we are finding these gym buddies as well, not only do they have similar interests as us, but maybe their schedules line up with us.
Absolutely.
That would be another thing that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
So the best way to find a gym buddy, I would say, is attend some drop-in sports at the CRWC. Gyms 3, 4, and 5 within the campus recreation and wellness center have drop-in sports happening daily. If there's an event in there, of course, you can always swing up and maybe go for a walk on the track or join one of our free group fitness classes. I'm finding that the group fitness classes are a really good way for like-minded people to meet each other and to maybe, go do a session in the Flex after, right? At the Flex itself, if there's someone who you're consistently seeing there at the same time as you, or maybe every day that you do leg day, they're also doing leg day. Yeah. Maybe they're your perfect gym buddy.
Yeah.
Right? Just, again, making sure that we're communicating with people. If I saw Heather at the gym and I didn't know who she was, but she looks really nice and she's smiling, maybe I'm going to go over and have a conversation with her and say, hey, what's your name? What time do you come to the gym? Yeah. Maybe we can do some workouts together.
Yeah. And as we mentioned earlier, right, it helps us hold each other accountable, increase that performance, and really get to those shared goals in a more efficient way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
This is the end of our episode today. You can check us out on Instagram at DCOTCHWC and
DCOT Campus Recreation DCOT.
You can follow the Media Hub as well on social media at DCSA Media Hub. Yep. We'll see you next week on The Mental Game, live from the Media Hub here on riotradio.ca.